Welcome to the Explainer. Today we are unpacking a literal tug of war between regular trial courts and a specialized government agency over a piece of land in the Philippines. It's an absolutely fascinating legal puzzle drawn straight from a 2021 Supreme Court en banc decision, and it really gets into what happens when two totally different pillars of the justice system collide over the exact same property.
Let's set the stakes right out of the gate here. Who really has the power to decide when a landowner cries trespass while a group of farmers claim the very same land under agrarian reform? You know, when two completely different sets of laws govern the same patch of dirt, figuring out the rightful referee is honestly half the battle.
To navigate this decision, here's our quick roadmap. We're going to start with the Bolasong land dispute, look at the jurisdictional tug of war, examine the case of two precedents, break down the two-step agrarian test, and finally, look at the Supreme Court's actual verdict.
Okay, part 1, the Bolasong land dispute, a tale of two claims.
Let's jump right into the inciting incident. The property we're talking about involves two parcels of land in Bolasong, Misamis Oriental, originally owned by a woman named Angelina Dederit. Back in 1993, the government placed her land under the coverage of the Comprehensive Agrarian Reform Program, or CARP. By 2001, her original land titles were canceled, and the government handed out Certificates of Land Ownership Award, which we call CLOs, to 15 farmers. Fast forward to 2006, and Angelina files a forcible entry suit in a regular municipal court against those 15 farmers to kick them off the land, claiming she was unlawfully deprived of physical possession. As you can imagine, the two parties had completely opposed viewpoints here. From the original landowner's perspective, strangers had basically sneaked onto her property and refused to leave. To her, it's a clear-cut case of trespassing. But look at the beneficiary's view. They're acting entirely within their rights, occupying the property simply because the government officially awarded them the land through those CLOs. Both sides feel absolutely justified by the law. So that brings us to part 2, the jurisdictional tug-of-war, regular courts versus the DAR. The core issue here is that the competing mandates of these two bodies are entirely at odds. Under the Judiciary Reorganization Act, regular first-level courts, like the Municipal Circuit Trial Court, have exclusive original jurisdiction over forcible entry cases. Their job is summary peacekeeping, right? Quickly figuring out who had prior physical possession so people don't go taking the law into their own hands. But on the flip side, the Department of Agrarian Reform, acting through its adjudicatory board, the DARUB, has primary and exclusive jurisdiction over agrarian disputes in the implementation of CARP. Now, this is absolutely crucial, so stick with me here. Grasping the specific legal definition of an agrarian dispute is key because the entire Supreme Court decision hinges on it. According to Republic Act 6657, an agrarian dispute isn't just about a landlord and a tenant squabbling over crop shares. It explicitly includes any controversy relating to the transfer of ownership from landowners to farm workers, tenants, and other agrarian reform beneficiaries. Keep that in the back of your mind, because that is the exact situation happening in Bolasong. Moving on to part 3, the case of two precedents, David versus Chales. We're going to stir the pot a bit by introducing two seemingly contradictory legal precedents. I mean, how have courts handled this kind of overlap before? Well, the first precedent is the David case. The Supreme Court previously ruled that regular courts must not abdicate their jurisdiction to resolve physical possession just because land happens to be agricultural. The David case basically said regular courts can, and really should, handle ejectments to keep the peace and prevent criminal disorder. Now, Angelina Dederit leaned heavily on this. She argued her forcible entry suit was literally just about physical possession, totally separate from the larger issue of ownership. And sure, regular courts handle trespassing, but what happens when the so-called trespassers are holding government-issued land titles under an agrarian reform program? It's a massive curveball, and it completely flips the script on the entire legal landscape for this specific dispute. The real turning point came with the amendatory law RA 9700 and the Chales case. Back in 2009, the law was amended to add a mandatory automatic referral mechanism. It explicitly stated that regular courts cannot take cognizance of cases pertaining to CARP implementation. Plus, the Chales case clarified that since this amendment was procedural, it actually applied retroactively to pending cases. Bottom line, regular courts had to step back and respect the DAR's exclusive domain. All right, part 4, the two-step agrarian test, solving the puzzle. To clear up the confusion, the Supreme Court in the Chales case laid out this really elegant, mandatory two-step test. Step 1, there has to be an allegation from any of the parties that the case is agrarian in nature.
And step 2, there needs to be actual proof adduced that one of the parties is a farmer, farm worker, or agricultural tenant. If both of these steps are hit, a regular judge is legally obligated to automatically refer the pending case straight over to the DAR. Which brings us to our final section, Part 5, the Supreme Court's verdict applying the test. When looking at the facts of our Bolasong dispute, the Supreme Court noted that the farmers perfectly met both requirements of the test. First, right from their initial answer in the regular court, the farmers consistently alleged that the land was awarded to them as CARP beneficiaries. So, boom, step 1 satisfied. Second, and honestly most importantly, they held actual certificates of land ownership award. Those CLOAs are the ultimate proof cementing their status as agrarian beneficiaries, fully satisfying step 2. So this wasn't just a run-of-the-mill trespassing issue, it was a controversy arising directly from the transfer of ownership under agrarian reform. As a result, the Supreme Court completely overturned the initial Municipal Circuit Trial Court's ruling. You see, the lower court had initially treated this as a standard ejectment, ruling that since Angelina had prior possession, the farmers essentially took the law into their own hands and had to vacate. But the Supreme Court stepped in and said, no, wait a minute, the lower court fundamentally lacked the authority to even hear this case. Because it met that two-step test, it was undeniably an agrarian dispute. So, the final verdict. The Department of Agrarian Reform, acting through the DARAB, is the one who rightfully swings the gavel here. The regular court's ruling was voided entirely, and Angelina's forcible entry complaint was outright dismissed for lack of jurisdiction. 15 years. Let that sink in for a second. That is the staggering amount of time this single forcible entry suit bounced around between different courts. From the time it was filed in 2006 all the way up to the Supreme Court resolution in 2021. And this proves exactly why understanding proper jurisdiction matters so immensely. Filing in the wrong venue doesn't just get your case dismissed, it can literally result in a decade and a half of wasted time, wasted resources, and unfulfilled legal rights for absolutely everyone involved. I want to leave you with this final thought. While the Supreme Court ultimately clarified the rules of the game here, Angelina was left waiting on separate pending cases regarding her CARP exemption, while the farmers spent 15 years defending their right to stay on land the government had already awarded them. It really forces us to question the overall efficiency of a system where overlapping legal battles can just suspend the reality of land ownership for decades. Thank you so much for joining me on The Explainer today, and I hope this helped clarify a truly complex piece of jurisprudence.